So what happened? You were watching a show or
This is also a very fast. If you are thinking about starting your own podcast, whether we talk about art, whether we talk about poetry, whether we talk about maybe something else that's relevant in your own life, and you're like, I just don't know where to start because it's a little overwhelming. I don't know what equipment I need. I don't know if I need a camera. We are here to walk you through that process. Let's begin by talking a little bit about hardware. What's the most basic hardware that you need to start a podcast? It's a microphone. Please get a microphone. Please get a microphone.
No, just use your phone's microphone.
I mean, so if the only thing holding you back is like, oh, I'm just equipment, fine. Then use your phone because your phone is certainly better. Nothing in your phone nowadays is better certainly than phones, 5, 10, 20 years ago for sure. But once you try it out and once you decide like, hey, I actually want to start taking this a little bit more seriously, the first major investment you're going to make is probably in a microphone. The microphone doesn't have to be a crazy expensive one. Like even just getting like a $20 microphone is already a pretty big improvement over, in general, what your phone is going to have. I do want to talk about different types of microphones that you want to consider based on your environment where you're going to be recording. The big thing is that there is a type of microphone called a condenser microphone, and then there's a type of microphone called a dynamic microphone. Matthias, you do a lot of recording and things like that. So like I'm imagining like if we were thinking about what type of microphone to get for you, because maybe as you're filming, you're like, hey, I want to actually also maybe record some clips to make my own like kind of like behind the scenes like podcast or something like that. So like most of the places that you're filming, are they pretty loud? Are they quiet? Are they soundproofed?
It can vary depending on kind of the film or kind of the purpose of the shooting. Because a lot of times like we're filming something, but we're filming like ADR or something like that.
Okay.
So we're filming something specifically for sound.
Okay. If that were me and I was like, okay, I want to prepare for a podcast for that sort of situation, I'd probably lean more dynamic. And the reason I would lean more dynamic, so a dynamic microphone basically is it's less sensitive to noise. So what does that mean? That means that if you're in a room and when the furnace turns on, you can hear the furnace, or when the air conditioner is on, you can hear the air conditioning. Or if you're like us and we got like a big window and lots of traffic nearby, and you're like, I want to try to minimize that as much as possible, the dynamic microphone is going to be better for that because a condenser microphone is going to pick up everything. This is also a very fast and punchy sound.
Yeah.
Because it's super, super sensitive. So the advantage of that is if you have a soundproofed room and you're like, I want to capture all the tiny nuances of my voice, a condenser microphone is going to do a much better job of that. So like if you're doing like voice acting and like you're in like a sound booth or something like that, condenser microphone is going to be the way to go. But I think for a lot of people, if you're like just doing this like in your basement or at home, maybe you have kids, the dynamic microphone is probably going to be the one to go. Other thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. I think that so we actually shot a scene kind of near or like on High Street, where it's that big room in the convention center that has that like face.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Had that face thing, and I kind of experienced kind of exactly that because we actually had it was like an artist, and so he was kind of doing this like kind of hanging mic deal, and we had the condenser mic because of the fact that we were. Because aesthetically of what it looked like, and we were like, we can just actually use it like practically as well. But the problem with that is that again, we were because and it's not even a lot of traffic, so I could just kind of let you know like kind of how much it's picking up because sometimes there can be sounds that you're just not paying attention to because you've intentionally drowned them out in your head, so like you're not even necessarily hearing them, so you're thinking that everything is silent. Or it's quiet enough to where the person can be recording and kind of having a pretty solid sound quality. Yeah. But yeah, when we went back to listen to it back, I was like, "What's that commercial? Where is that commercial coming from?" And we just listened to it. Like we listened out stereo a little bit more. We're like, "Oh, like that's where it's coming from." So we just ended up switching we still use the condenser mic almost as like a prop, but then we use the dynamic mic. We use what did we use? Was it a short? No, it wasn't a short. It was a
We're going to talk about different types of mics, so like we'll give you some examples of what are some condensers that are popular versus what are some dynamics that are popular, so that way that'll help you with your choice if you choose to make an investment. I would, speaking to that situation, if you're in a new environment just trying to get an idea of the sound, please do a sound test. You don't even necessarily even need to talk during the sound test, but just kind of record just the kind of like just the noise to get an idea what the ambient noise kind of sounds like and see what the microphone's picking up versus what it's not. There are ways to control it. We'll talk about software in a moment. So if you're like, I can't get rid of the, even if I have the right microphone, I still can't get rid of all the traffic, or I still can't get rid of it. So we'll talk about things, for instance, like noise gates and also like noise reduction. But the best sound quality is going to come when you have to minimize the use of software to edit the audio. You want as clean audio input as possible just right off the bat.
Especially for overlapping sound, because a lot of software does do a really great job at deciphering, like maybe your specific voice if it's overlaying like maybe like other talking somewhere else, and so then it's just going to try to flatten everything, and you're gonna run into sound issues.
Your voice is going to sound a little muddy, or it can sound a little tinny. It can sound like your voice has just been edited. And it will remove some of the background stuff, but it does come at a cost. You lose some of the range that your voice naturally has. Just to give you an example of the type of microphones to look at, condenser mics, probably one of the most common condenser mics that a lot of people start off with is like a Blue Yeti or a Snowball, which are like, it's like a round microphone. I used to have one.
Like singers and rappers use those as well.
They're a lot of them are running like the lower end ones are like $50 or something like that, and they're fine for starting, but again, they do pick up everything, so just kind of be aware of that. So like Blue Yeti ones, this microphone that you see here, this is from Austrian Audio. One of the reasons I like this microphone is because you have a little bit of control over the direction that it picks up sound from. It's really good for interviews. It's like if I have one person sitting like across from each other, you can kind of still get audio from both. So like if you're doing an interview type setting, this microphone's really good, because if you just have one microphone, you're gonna miss someone's audio. Like for instance, I'm using a lapel mic. I'm not sure if you can see it over here as well, which will probably be my primary audio for this video. Which would be good for me, but even Matthias being over there, it's not going to come in as clear his audio, even though he's literally like right next to me, but it's mostly going to get my voice.
Green screen.
This is right. He's actually in another room, just like usual. So those are some examples of some condenser microphones to check out. This Austrian Audio one is a $300. Like if you get the full setup with two mics, it's about $300. Whereas the Blue Yeti is like $50. So there's a range that you can go to. In terms of dynamic microphones, a common one is Shure has a couple microphones I just want to mention. For those of you who have seen my videos where I have like the silver microphone at home, that's called the Shure MV7. That is a dynamic microphone.
So what happened? You were watching a show or a movie or listening to some native speakers talk, and they say this whole group of words.
One thing I do want to note about dynamic microphones, it's true for any microphone, but because dynamic microphones are less sensitive, you want to kind of figure out where the audio point is. So like when you get a microphone, it's kind of helpful to like do a test where like you start off kind of this, and then also doing it to the sides like this, just to kind of see where does the microphone pick up audio, because all microphones are a little different. Some microphones want you to be a little higher than them. Some of them want you to be a little lower. Some of them want to be on the left. Some of them want to be on the right. So you want to see kind of where they're picking up the audio from. A lot of times these dynamic microphones like the MV7, that microphone costs $250, maybe? Something like that, a couple $100. And it wants you to eat it. It really wants you to be like your lips almost touching like the filter, the pop filter on it. The higher end one, if you're like $200, already expensive for microphones, but the microphones get crazy expensive. The step above that would be the SM7B. That's the one that, in general, radio shows use it. Professional podcasters use it. That microphone, in general, is you're looking at like probably about $400. The last thing I'll mention is that a lot of these higher end microphones, in terms of hardware, are not going to be able to operate just on their own. You're going to need what's called like phantom power. You're going to need something that basically gives it power. And then you may also need like a mixer or a soundboard. Now, one thing I will note is a lot of soundboards also have power included. So for instance, the soundboard that I use, when you see my silver microphone, the soundboard I'm using for that is a Rodecaster, and that also gives power to my microphone too. Again, if you get the soundboard, again, the one I use is a Rodecaster, that will give you power, and it also allows you to get multiple inputs, because that's the next thing we'll be talking about. Because if you're doing a podcast, there's a good chance that it's not just going to be you. A lot of times people starting podcasts have a co-host, or to do interviews or things like that, which means you're going to need multiple inputs. You're going to have multiple microphones, and you're like, how do I get multiple microphones into my one computer or whatever it is that you're using to record? And so let's actually talk a little bit about that, because that kind of covers our basis for hardware for microphones. I think there's a couple of audio editing functions that I encourage you to look up. The very first thing I would encourage you to look up would be noise reduction. Noise reduction basically is the software attempting to identify background noise and then removing it. If you use certain programs, you can like identify an area and say, hey, this is the noise I'm trying to get rid of. Can you take this away? And then it will apply it to the whole track. Okay. Other concepts you probably want to be familiar with, you should be familiar with noise gates. Noise gates basically are, let's say again, you're in a room like this and you're getting some traffic noise, and you're like, okay, I don't want my audio to pick up the traffic noise because the traffic noise is low enough. So like imagine that there's like a filter, and basically if anything gets caught in the filter, it doesn't come through the audio. That's basically kind of what a noise gate does. It basically says, hey, we're not going to detect anything at this decibel level for making this sound, which can come at a cost because it takes a lot of tweaking the settings on, because you have to determine how sensitive everything's going to be. Other software thing that no matter what editing software you're using, you probably want to get familiar with is a compressor. Basically, a compressor says, it compresses. It's like, hey, I don't want you to pick up the super high pitch stuff. I don't want you to pick up the super low pitch stuff. So the disadvantage again of a compressor is you can lose out some of the nuance of your voice, because it might take away some of your high pitch stuff, but it might take away some of your low. Okay, and so it's like, it just kind of squeeze it together.
Jeff actually sounds like what's that one girl from Willy Wonka? Whatever girl that ended up turning into a blueberry. That's how Jeff actually sounds. But because of technology, he sounds like you.
Yeah. Post surgery. It was a massive success.
But at what cost?
Yeah. So those are just some basic audio editing things I'll be looking at. So again, noise gates, noise reduction or noise removal, it depends on the program, and also compressors. And actually some soundboards may allow you to do those things automatically on the soundboard. Like the Rodecaster lets you play around with a noise gate and a compressor on the actual soundboard itself. The last thing I'll say is, if all those things sound really scary and technical, then you can use AI. This is an area that is improving very, very quickly. The program that I use the most that's AI based is called Adobe. So it's like Adobe Enhanced Audio. So you can actually just like literally just Google that phrase, like Adobe Enhanced Audio. It's a platform. The free, I just use the free one because the free lets you input audio that is up to 30 minutes. And so, I mean, in all honesty, what you could do is, if your episode's longer, just cut it into 30-minute sections and then just keep uploading it. And it'll do all these things we just talked about. It will identify what the background noise is. It'll identify issues with the audio, and it will kind of smooth things out and take things away. What I have found with it is it does make the audio a little bit bassy. I'll show you some demonstrations here. And you can tell the audio's been adapted. I don't think you don't sound AI, but you can definitely tell that, oh, this has been run through something.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it tends to amplify the bassier notes, just a note. Other things that come to mind for audio editing?
Well, so I mean, maybe a question for you, because I think a lot of times when we're looking at like jumping over into like using like exterior programs, like what would you say is the ease of use for either one of those?
For
Like for a beginner.
So again, noise gates are pretty complicated. And noise gates are, it's so much tweaking, and a lot depends on the audio you're using. So like if you're doing audio in different settings as in like places, then all like the levels that you use for one place may not work well for another place.
Yeah.
Or like if you do an interview with another person, well then now you gotta kind of change everything. Noise gates take a lot of kind of trial and error with audio. Noise reduction is a little bit easier. We're going to talk about a program called Audacity. Audacity is free. It's software, and it's probably the manual audio editing tool I use the most, in all honesty. And the feature I use the most is the noise reduction. Just trying to see where that's going. For the noise reduction, again, you identify a portion of the audio that you want to kind of use as like the gauge, like, hey, this is the audio I'm trying to get rid of, and then you can apply it to the whole track, and it takes away. That's the tool I use the most. Even just doing that step, it takes, if you have a 20-minute audio file, that noise reduction process between identifying the section and then applying it to the whole track takes like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and it has a pretty dramatic improvement on the audio quality. So it's if that's the only editing you do, that's still pretty helpful editing compared to just taking your raw file.
Yeah. We talked about it a little bit on like the last pod, the arts and office pod back on Tuesday. But it's one of those things that like I've used Audacity before, but I haven't gotten into a rhythm of it. I think I used it to tutorial something to kind of figure some things out, but I haven't used it practically in any of my work thus far. But yeah, it's one of those things that if you find something, and this is, and again, a conversation that makes me really want to kind of re-engage with it to kind of see, okay, like maybe I just need to give it the time of day. But yeah, it's like if you can find something that can save, something that saves you 5 minutes, it's like that, right? Like if somebody told me something, like I'm working on a project right now that's like, right now we have 4.5 terabytes worth of just like raw footage, and we're probably not even like a quarter way through with like everything that we're gonna kind of need. Actually, because of the fact that like, so we also have been planning out some of the B-roll. And the B-roll we actually do have to have on like the highest quality, because we're doing like some like slow mo. So yeah, just to say that we're going to be like getting a lot of like that, and that just takes a long time to edit, a long time to upload. But if somebody was like, hey, something can save you 5 minutes, like I'm taking that.
Yeah.
100% of the time. So yeah, exactly like that. Just finding things that save you time and save you resources is always super welcome.
Yeah, the fast one will be the noise reduction on Audacity. I will say Audacity is a program that you open it up and it looks really intimidating. The user interface is not the friendliest, but it's a free program and it's extremely powerful, especially for being a free program. Most podcasters who are taking podcasting seriously at some point have used Audacity. They may have graduated to something else, but it's the starting point for so many people because it can do so much. The next thing, if that sounds scary, just using the AI thing, AI is probably going to be the direction that most things are going to go in, the next 6 months, year to 2 years, and things like that. But if you're still interested in doing manual, that's what Audacity is for. The last software thing I want to talk about is hosting. So let's imagine you've recorded, you've edited the audio, you're happy with it. What do you do with it? Well, you got to get it online. You have to put it onto a platform. There's different platforms out there. The one that I've used for my teaching podcast is Buzzsprout. I'm going to show you guys what that looks like as I talk through it. So Buzzsprout is free. It's freemium, right? So it's like you can put podcasts on there for free and it will host them for like 90 days and then it archives them for like another set period of time. And then once that time expires, then it deletes it. So that's for the free version. And then if you can do paid versions for like $5-10 a month or whatever, and then it won't do any of that archiving or removing the clips. So that's kind of a paid option, and that's very what a lot of them are like. I think there's also like Red Circle. There's a couple other platforms like that, but a lot of them are doing very similar things. What I'm experimenting with for the verses is not using Buzzsprout because I didn't want to pay. I'm using Spotify. So Spotify is trying to go more in on podcasting. So they have Spotify for creators, and it's free, which is interesting to me. And not only is it free, but it also allows you to link to directories. What does that mean? So that means that if I put it on Spotify, I can also tell Spotify, hey, put it on Apple Music, put it on, all those other podcast platforms where people get their podcasts from. I mean, Apple Music is like by and large like the biggest, but there are other ones out there. So it does it for free. Whereas like platforms like Buzzsprout and things you generally are paying for. So I'm fine with that. It's been going okay for like the Spotify. What I will say is that I think a lot of people still don't approach Spotify as like a podcasting platform. Still approach it more for music. They're working on it. And I also say that, Spotify may or may not really have an incentive for you to, or incentive for them to push your podcast. So I think a lot of the promotion, I wouldn't be relying on like search on Spotify to get discovered. Podcasting is a long-term play, and not even that guarantees results. So you kind of need to go into it expecting to have to do some work on your own. Yeah.
I'd be interested in kind of like why.
That's what all these other podcast platforms cost money, and this one does. So there's that adage, if it's free, then you're the product. So I'm sure they're,
that's
but
true. That way they can get you to. Oh, actually, that actually kind of does make sense because then they're like, if you want visibility of your podcast, and you're gonna come here to post the podcast as opposed to going to, like, I'm going to post it on Apple Music. And then post it on Spotify. I would just stay within the Spotify, website to do that. So that makes sense.
Yeah, but there's probably other things that they know of that we don't, and that's why they have it free. But
I don't think there's anything they know.
But for me, I'm fine with it for right now. Maybe in the future I'll change, but for me, I'm okay. So you'll need a hosting platform, and then you set up your hosting platform, you upload your audio, and you're good to go. Congratulations. Just started your first podcast. I did want to just take a moment to talk about why I think it is important to consider podcasting, because I think podcasting is something that you hear that like, oh, this person started a podcast, and like people roll their eyes, or people like, oh, like another podcast, like, or it's just another like 30-year-old guy starting a podcast or things like that, especially like, in the last like 5 years or so. But just a couple of things that I've found with podcasting is, one, it's helped me develop my own ideas on topics and like coming up with original thought. So it in a lot of ways, like, it doesn't really matter to me how many views and things a podcast gets, because I'm getting better at the thing I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean, people really downplay like talking to yourself, and again,
Yeah.
by extension, you like doing a podcast where you're kind of working through a lot of these ideas and things like that. Because like even in talking to another person, maybe I don't get information directly from that other person, but I am able to access more kind of like reasoning about what I'm doing because I'm actually cognitively, having to formulate the idea with the intention of showing it and presenting it to somebody else. And so that a lot of times that kind of forms the idea or kind of, sharpens the idea a little bit more. So yeah, like going into a podcast space and being able to, like we, in the other podcast, but then also in like the thing that JR does, like when I was like talking, we were talking something about like comedy and like how comedy kind of reaches people. And I think that like I ended up like kind of tripping on something that I had not really consciously thought about a lot, but because I was in the space and people were asking the right questions and I was able to kind of formulate those thoughts, then it kind of flowers in that space. So
Yeah.
but also there's people are gonna hate, like you gotta
People also hate this.
people are gonna hate, but also it's so funny. Okay, so this is, I don't know if you're like really on. Have you seen the trend of the Ashton something like that? But he's like that morning routine. I gotta
out
put
of
you
it.
on,
Yeah,
man.
I'm out of it. Maybe you don't have to.
It's a good. I think it's a really good kind of. It's a really good example of exactly what you're talking about when it comes to like people like, oh, here's another one of these, because it's like he's a person. He went super viral starting last week because he has some kind of incredibly elaborate morning routine. You know what I mean? Like he wakes up, he has like the tape over his mouth, like when he wakes up, like I don't like that's supposed to help with something. But he tears the tape off. He dunks his head in this like bottle of water and all. It's kind of bizarre to like the average person, but he just recorded this morning routine, and it's so funny because it went so viral. It has like 600 million views, like the last time that I checked.
Right.
And I think about it because so many of the views are people that like really genuinely don't. Not even, I don't want to say genuinely. They're making fun of it,
right,
or they're talking about it, like they're talking
as
negatively
they're pushing it
and
further.
as I'm like, you guys don't understand. Like whatever you're doing, that's part of it. Like you should expect that there's going to be a demographic of people that are not going to like, what the fact that you're talking about things. That's really with any art, any field. But there's going to be a demographic that are like users, and so they're going to be able to use what you're doing and things like that. There's going to be a demographic that are customers, and so maybe you're going to be able to transition like those people that are like, oh, I'm just taking in your content to like whatever you're selling at the end of that pipeline, if there is another thing or a product or a service or anything like that. And I think focusing in on that potential, because of the fact that you have that kind of visibility, is more important than being held up by, oh man, here's another guy with his thing. Because 600, it's way over that now.
Yeah, for sure.
I checked, but 600 million is like nuts, and most of it's just like hate watching.
Yeah. So I think that should be another episode we can do for Arts and Offers, is just talking about how people like handling negativity, and there's the actual advantages that come with the negativity, because there are advantages that come with it. The other thing I'll say is that for podcasts help you reach people that otherwise would have been difficult to reach, because a lot of people listen to podcasts while they're out on a run, or while they're washing dishes, or while they're driving. Situations where it's maybe not as easy to watch a video. Podcasting allows you to still get into their head, literally, because they can listen to you. So there are some advantages just in terms of reach. You're going to be able to get at people in a way that other forms won't quite work for specific moments. I'll also say from a discovery point of view, it can be helpful, because again, just if you're reaching those people, then there's a chance that you can get discovered by more people that, again, if you're just making videos and someone instead is mostly on a podcast platform, well, how are you ever going to reach them? But if you have a video version and a podcast version, well, now you're potentially maybe not doubling, but you are adding on to the amount of people that you can actually get in touch with. Which connects with the final thing I will say is that I think podcasting pairs very well with blogs and texts and videos. If you make a video, you cut the audio and you have a podcast. That's what I do with my teaching channel, and that's what we do with a lot of our videos here on Diverses. You can take a podcast, run the audio through AI, and it can come up with a transcript for you. You can use that transcript to turn into blogs and social media posts. So there's a lot of versatility that can come with a podcast, especially if you're approaching, however it is that you're reaching people through different modes. Podcast, I think, is a pretty good compliment.
Yeah, and it's also, I don't know, there's something really endearing, I think, about podcasts that is, because you're listening in on a conversation, you're also like listening in on like somebody that is like working through something. Mm-hmm. Whereas like, a lot of other presentations of like audio is like, and like these aren't necessarily negative, but like, like music or something of that nature where, like people are like really engaged with that art as a medium, which like those are good. But yeah, having a podcast, and especially because again, more than likely, nothing that you're kind of bring up is going to be this completely fresh and new idea that's never been thought of before. But the funnel is different, right? Because it's you talking about it. It's you bringing these topics up, and it's you reaching this demographic with your very specific like tools and techniques. So yeah, like having that as an extension of your platform, I think, it can really just get your audience into your mind a little bit more.